Well, happy Thursday. Welcome to December. It is officially December 2nd, as we are live streaming this. Welcome to So What, the Marketing Analytics and Insights live show. With it being December and end of the year, what we wanted to cover today was last minute sales tips. So you're probably getting all of the emails in your inbox of, hey, just want to send you a thing, or hey, can we set up a meeting? More so than you do throughout the whole entire year. So 'tis the season to unsubscribe and block everybody from your inbox. That said, if you are still looking to, meet your quotas, what we wanted to do today was especially talk with John. So John handles the business development for Trust Insights, and John is, for all intents and purposes, the least sleazy salesperson I've ever met in my entire life, which is why we felt very comfortable bringing him on, because at no point did I get that ick factor from John selling. Trust me, John, these are words of praise, not uh, anything negative. I often describe you as the guy who can sell ice to an Eskimo, because you have a really good sense of what do people need and how can you meet them where they are without that like hard in your face sell. So with that lovely, you know, uh, introduction that I just gave you, we're covering a couple of things today. So where do you guys want to start?
That's it. Yeah, well, of course, we start with the fact that I am. It's not that I am not sleazy. I am just the least sleazy of the people.
Well, I mean, it's sales, so there's like a little percentage of sleaze involved.
There is, and it has evolved a lot too. To be honest, it's has changed in so much now that sales has virtually no leverage.
Mhm.
Even as early as like 10 years ago, sales still had some leverage. They had some control over pricing and the information that was out there and things like that. So they could hold you over a barrel, and that's where all the great, sales stories come from, the Glengarry, Glen Ross, and all these places of people who can just will a deal to make happen if they just push somebody hard enough.
Mhm.
And that's just not the case. But there's three fronts that I wanted to throw out there, which are, market. There's one segment of business that can just do business now because they are attached to this time of year for one reason or another. The second are feature related um, products. We talk product marketing all the time. But I want to just say features, so I'm not getting down that product marketing rat hole. And then the third are manipulations, which are the things that, those are the unsubscribes, the, buy this week, get two free for the holiday kind of thing, that are usually race to the bottom stuff and cause all kinds of problems downstream. But, there are reasons to do that, and there is an upside to it. And yeah, I'd throw out too, for anybody on the chat, if you want to throw in anything that you've received in the past couple of weeks, if you got any horrible offers or stuff that either made you laugh or cry or take advantage of. I think my big one for this week has been, John, we'd really love to have this executive on our podcast, and I know they'd be a perfect fit because I love your show, 6 Pixels of Separation, which is not the podcast we do, but so that makes my wall of shame for this week. And so if you've got one, throw it out over there.
Well, it's funny because your name is not Mitch and you are not Canadian.
These things slip through. Well, you had a killer one last week. You got some kind of bulk email. I saw that, like, they missed everything. There was no subject line. There was no body to the
Oh,
message. It was just like I totally give somebody, we've all been there, probably everybody
yeah.
here on this panel, where you've sent something off and the link didn't work, or one of the merge fields got munged on the way out. But to send something that's just like, to do a blank send, I don't even know how the heck that would happen. So I have to give them credit for that one.
Well, you know what's funny? I did get a follow-up to that email, and it said it was around the timing of Thanksgiving, so it was like sorry for the turkey of an email. And so it on the one hand, I was like, oh, well, at least they're acknowledging. But on the other hand, I was like, did they do it on purpose so that they could send that follow-up email and get extra attention in the inbox? And it's one of those things, like, unless I know the person personally, I'll never know the answer to it, but at least it got me wondering. So it was a different tactic I hadn't seen. The one that I'm seeing sort of come through my inbox right now is people pretending that they're sending the dear bracket first name, and then it's the just kidding. And it's like, oh, please stop. Just like, what is it that you want? Just send me an email.
Yeah, that's definitely like inside baseball. That's like, yeah, it's a joke to some marketing people, but it's just uh, well, I always talk about how, we created marketing over coffee because I already knew how successful marketing automation jokes were for my family at Thanksgiving. They had no interest in any kind of marketing humor, and you get burned on that. So yeah, and it is funny you talk about it used to be a sales thing and a marketing talking about the miraculous recovery. Where you screw something up, so that's your opportunity to come back now and like really. That's a great customer service thing too. If you've kind of messed something up, go in and just fix it beyond their wildest dreams, so they rave about it. But yeah, unfortunately, we've become so battle worn and suspicious of everything that now we just assume that's yet another stunt to send that second email, and that we can't go with that.
I have a question for you guys before we dig in, because I feel like this has been a shift over the past few years in terms of sales. And so, Chris, when you talk about sales and you talk about like cold calling, you talk about the smile and dial, which is literally someone picking up the phone and calling. But I feel like cold calling people doesn't work. It's not as effective anymore because number one, most of us are all at home. So you'd have to have a cell phone number versus a business line. And two, John, we've spent the first 5 minutes of the show talking about emails. And so emails as the way in which people are connecting. I remember when I worked a few jobs ago and I was helping the sales team, I gave them a list of people to call. And the sales guy got really mad because he was like, well, where are the email addresses? I'm like, they're not provided, but I have phone numbers for you. And he was unwilling to call people. So I guess I'm curious, both from your perspective of like, when did that change and why can't we just pick up the phone and call people? Why do we have to default to email first?
Well, the simple answer as to why email is this, right? This stuff, phones are expensive. Phone calling, call centers, people getting on the phone, etc. All that costs money, a lot of labor, compared to just batch and blast sending out, truckloads of email. Even if 0.1% of people respond to your email, if you're sending, cranking out 1 million emails, you're still going to see some results out of it for a much lower cost. Is it better? No. To what John was saying originally, it's kind of a race to the bottom as to who can get the most attention. I was counting through my emails earlier, and from Black Friday, Small Business Saturday, Cyber Monday, and Giving Tuesday had something close to 3,000 emails in my inbox, of which I deleted 2,997 of them. And so everybody is starving for attention. There is benefit doing cold calling if you know who it is you're calling. They are 100% in your market, and we do see with some parts of the population it does work, right? Folks, for example, my parents' generation, people are cold calling them all the time, and it does work to some degree.
Yeah, one thing with that is that, cold calling, you do have to view it as marketing, right? I mean, those are really awareness campaigns. You're hoping to stumble upon somebody who doesn't know your brand well enough to search for you first. And there's definitely that age thing of, there's once you go below a certain age when digital divide, sprung up, that they don't. Phone calls are viewed as an intrusion. I mean, if anything, you should be sending a text to warm up for a call so they expect it, because a lot of people just don't want to talk on the phone at all.
One thing I've seen work really well is direct mail. We've seen this with a couple of our clients now. Direct postal mail targeted, to very specific segments actually works really well, because you open up your inbox, there's 700 emails. You open up your postal box, there's 2 bills and like some random postcard from your realtor, and that's it. So there's not a lot of attention you're competing for in the actual postal mailbox.
Yeah, and that's, it definitely costs more to go that route. So you have to really be a lot more intelligent about who you want to mail to and where you want to go, because there's a price tag attached. But yeah, it does get on the desk, which is, a challenge these days.
So, John, one of the things we wanted to talk about was the difference between manipulation and product marketing. And so, what are some of the tips there? And I know we've sort of been talking about, the kind of almost like the bait and switch emails or the attention grabbing emails that don't really tell you much. So like for a last minute sales tip, like what does someone need to be thinking about so that they're not going down the road of manipulation and really, they're thinking more about the true product marketing?
Yeah, and even so, you got product, features are actually touching the space versus manipulations, and at the top end, you actually have organizations where this is their market, right? If you're selling Christmas trees, there's no better weekend than this weekend. This is as good as it's going to get. So that's the sweetest spot. If you've got something that's direct to the holiday, that can, that's the easy hit, the easy way to go. And at that point, you're doing normal business. You really have no incentive to give too many discounts or do anything up front because you're on the mark. So then, next step is, product marketing features. Does what you do match something that's going on in the holidays? And the greatest poster child for that is UPS and the Postal Service, right? They don't need the holiday season, but the holiday season is prime time for them to, do a ton of business, and it can. That's got matches with retail, right? They're always open, but the holidays are going to be huge because it's just driving purchasing. So really, for features for any company doing shipping, for example, speed of shipping is huge. If you're a day ahead of anybody else, people will pay a premium for that, and you can take advantage of that and make that work. We actually have features on that front. There's actually some things going on with that because there's a bunch of clients and organizations that ramp up their ad spend and their e-commerce activity during this time of year. So that does give us a better angle to come at people and say, hey, are you analyzing your holiday campaigns? Because it's even, there are orgs that will not do a heavy batch of analysis on what they do year round, but if their spend goes up 20 times, for this month, it probably is worth diving in and doing a bit more analysis on that to see what's working. And then, the last is manipulations. I mean, that's when you're just doing any kind of offer or freebie, price break, anything, just making noise to attract somebody's attention. And the real trade-off there, you are going to be taking a hit on margin. So you have to decide, is getting attention, doing that marketing worth what you're going to lose? And then there's also, a tough long-term play there, whereas most companies are willing to sacrifice everything for a quarter. You get this crazy thing like we have with Adobe, where everybody's forwarding around all these messages saying, hey, today's the day you go cancel your Adobe and re-sign up because, you can save $600 a year. Well, no, it's not 600. What you take up about 30 a month. So 300, over $300 a year. Like that's a classic manipulation. It has nothing to do with the holidays. It's just, hey, it's Black Friday, so we're going to try and get some action and excitement built up. But in the long run, are you really killing your margins and getting yourself burned? And then on top of that, there's a whole nother level of stuff in that there's all this holiday hype. Like that's one thing, basically this beefed up retail season. But the other thing at play is year end. So you've got a lot of organizations that are dealing with their budgets, and there's two big camps there. There's the people that have money to burn, and they need to burn it up in one way, shape, or form because otherwise it won't be in their budget next year. And then there's the other camp of people that are trying to map out their planning and spending for next year. And there can be opportunity for you there as far as, hey, if you lock in now for next year, we can give you a better price, or, there's a bunch of things to do on that front. But that's the whole thing. So if you can be in the market, if you can at least be in the market, try and do something that delivers more value to the customer. And then, worst case scenario, just start offering 20% off and buy one, get one free, and hope you don't burn the place to the ground.
Well, it's funny with I've been thinking through with the kind of services that we offer, it's hard for us to jump on that, Black Friday, Small Business Saturday, Cyber Monday, and offer like, hey, buy one predictive report, get one half off, without thinking through sort of, number one, the precedent that it sets that like these things are devalued just for this time of year, but you're still getting the same amount of work from us. And so we're taking a hit. But then also sort of, I can't imagine, going out with that hard sell of like, hey, I know you have money to burn by the end of the year. Why don't you burn it with us? We can figure out something to do. And so in a perfect world, like you could be that direct with people and be like, I know that we know you have money that you need to spend. And why don't you just go ahead and spend it with us and we'll do some cool things for you? I guess so this is why I'm not a salesperson, by the way.
Right.
This is why I'm not allowed to touch sales. But that would be my approach, is like, so I know you have money. I know you need to spend it. Why don't you spend it with us? And I guarantee you're going to get some cool stuff out of it.
That is the pitch. I mean, yeah, it's, that is kind of getting to hardcore sales and deal making, as far as, going to someone who has no intention of, doing business with you this month and talking them into it.
Mm-hmm.
And so then it's really a matter of how much trust have you established? And,
Yeah.
we're in a position that's always been our long-term approach, in that, yeah, I have a list of people who have been banging around the site for the last 3 months. They've been looking at every single white paper and downloading every single thing. And those are the people that I'd go with first, saying, hey, it's year end. Obviously you're interested in doing some cool stuff. Can we sit down and talk about what you're planning for next year? So that's definitely an opening. That's a real sales activity and opening. And, we've done some interesting stuff, whether, intentionally or not, but like Chris has a great LinkedIn paper out there, a LinkedIn resource about, how to get your resume ready to change jobs. And that's a great red flag. If I see somebody downloading everything, but they also download the, I want to change my job, that this person is not, they're not going to be able to find that extra 20K at the end of the year. They're obviously looking to go someplace. So, but that's a huge thing, the trust you've established and the ability to know what resources they've been looking at or what they've been doing, to get a feel for, hey, is this something that they're going to want for next year, or someplace that they want to go?
Well, and I think you bring up a really good point, which is, something that we always come back to, is using the data that you have first in order to determine what to do next. And so you're talking about the CRM data, and ideally your CRM is set up in such a way that you can track the pages that people visit on your website, the amount of activity, how much they spend, how interested they are in your stuff. And you have maybe some sort of a scoring system set up. And so I think one of the mistakes that we see people do is just send out an end of the year blast to everybody on their list without any kind of segmentation, to say, hey, we have this end of year deal, or, whatever the thing is, the sales email, without really thinking through, where is this person in their journey, and can we break out into smaller buckets? Okay, these people are still just purely awareness, so we just need to continue to let them know who we are and what we do. These people have been with us for more than 6 months, and they visited 10 pages on our website, and they come back to see us every day, so maybe they're getting ready to do something. And then these people, this is something else we talked about, maybe have approached us, but maybe at the time they didn't have the money, or maybe for some other reason we didn't win the business. And so that, to me, those are 3 distinct buckets of people that you could be reaching out to in 3 different ways.
Yeah, and the pricing one is an interesting one. That's a whole thing. Rather than doing a fire sale, I do have the list of deals that did not close this year, and this is a perfect opportunity to get a better feel for what, was it a perception of value, or is it they just don't have budget? I can go back on specific deals and say, look, if we had been able to do this for X instead of the price that was originally put up there, would you have been able to do this or not? And I don't even have to offer it to them. I can just say, hey, if it had been this, would it have worked? Because we're just trying to figure out. And what you find is, with a lot of orgs, it's just that the person working on the project didn't have the authority. They wanted to do some cool stuff, but when it ultimately came down to it, when they went asking for the money, they can't get it, because they just, and it's not even that the money's not there. It's just that the person above them is not going to give it to them. So it's a good opportunity to get a better feel for a lot of prospects. Was it budget? Was it authority? Why did that exactly not work? And then, there may be some mismatches too. There's stuff where, ultimately the buyer does determine the value, right? They're the ones that say yes or no. We can put the pricing out there, but if the buyer doesn't bite, then the value isn't there for them. And it's a question of, and see, there's this weird inverse relationship for us, in that if they were just a bigger organization, the value would be there. It's like when we look at our digital customer journey reports, when you're measuring customer experience, well, if you're a $10 million business, there's not going to be much of anything that you can do that's going to justify you spending $100,000 on something. Whereas if you're a $100 million business, there's a lot of places you could probably drop $100,000 and have positive ROI. So, unfortunately, every prospect is unique, and the value is going to be different for them. And yeah, that's, really the job of sales these days, is sorting through all those piles and trying to find the prospects where there's values on both sides and they have the ability to get it done.
Mm-hmm. Chris, you look like you're contemplating. If I said to you, I need you to find $20,000 in deals in the next 3 weeks, what would your approach be?
Probably bank robbery.
Okay, let's confine it down to things that are legal and moral for the company.
I don't know that you can. One of the things that the Ehrenberg Bass Institute came out with earlier this year, which is part of the LinkedIn Business Institute, is saying that 95 to 90% of your buyers are not in market at any given time, and no matter how hard you push, if somebody can't buy, they're not going to buy, particularly in B2B, but even in high value B2C, right? Like, yeah, you could probably push somebody to buy an extra pack of gum. You could probably push somebody to buy a carton of juice that they've never tried before. It's going to be hard to push them to buy a car. It's going to be hard to push them to buy a college tuition or a house. And so the better question, which you alluded to, Katie, with CRM, is what data do you have that are buying signals? And are you keeping an eye on them? And do you know what those buying signals are? John, you talked about the activity level, certainly one of them. One that actually came to mind while John was talking about is we don't ever really, and I don't think this is something we'd have to build this, is measuring changes in activity velocity. Like, hey, suddenly this person's picking up, there's more hits faster from this person, and this person's slowed down, they're not downloading as much, and then seeing, okay, if a velocity change is occurring, we have to you go back test with your old data and say, like, did a velocity change occur before X client closed? And if so, is that a reliable indicator that the velocity of activity might be an indicator of sales? And if that would be an area that I would think you would have to do a heck of a lot of coding to pull it together. I know there are some marketing automation packages and ABM packages that can do that. They are, of course, reassuringly expensive, but if you're selling $1 million deals, it's worth it. But yeah, the big thing is knowing where people are in their journey. One of the things that we kind of assume, and it actually was something I was thinking about earlier, was when we talk about year end, that really only applies to companies for whose fiscal year ends with the calendar year, right? There's so many companies that they close the year in different quarters. And I can't say that I've ever seen a calendar, like, for example, by industry, of which, the probability that a company has a non-calendar year close. So, for example, like if you work with the U.S. government, the fiscal year starts July 1. So anything that's government related, you have essentially June, the month of June is their December. And that may be when the use it or lose it money is floating around. So one thing I would be curious to know, and if folks who are tuning in have any insight into this, is there good data on it per industry level about when different fiscal years close?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a great question, because not only do you have the use it or lose it thing, you also have the 2 months before year end is the budgeting cycle, and everybody's trying to figure out, they have to have a plan. And so you may not be able to close stuff at the end of the year, but you could be teeing a bunch of stuff to close in the first or second month. And, of course, the coffers are full in month 1 and 2. So that's when, you tend to see all these whales flow through, and the sales reps take their late summer vacation when they finally get their checks on the stuff that they've been working on since, the October before. But, lining that up and giving prospects a plan, that's kind of the flip one. Instead of the burning the money today, it's, okay, let us come in and help you with your strategic plan for next year. Do you have a vision of where you're going to go over the next 12 months? And how are you going to check in on every quarter, and being able to put together an annual package? And we see this all the time with our renewals, right? We've been doing all this work for you. Okay, now let's figure out what the next 12 months are going to look like, and, putting together that plan. And yeah, the payments can go either way. Some orgs are like, yeah, let's squeeze that first payment back into this fiscal year so we can cover that. And others will be like, no, let's, roll it forward because it needs to be part of that established budget for next year.
What are your thoughts on, especially, again, where we are sitting squarely in B2B, What are your thoughts on things like free trials and giving things away for free in order to bring in potential customers and then sort of saying, okay, you've gotten this thing for free. Now, after a month, you have to start paying for it. Like, is that a viable tactic for companies like ours?
Yeah, well, the question with that is because the dynamics of the B2B market have just changed so much, right? There's this whole swath of companies who don't care if they lose money every single quarter. There's companies that are just like, hey, adoption and happy customers, that's the currency that we need to get the next round of investment and to get to IPO. And so they really don't care about losing money every single quarter as long as the users continue to go up and you get more people on board. So yeah, there is, well, a very interesting and important part of that for us is the crazy thing is that anything we give away for free or a discount, we need to be giving away to people who don't need the discount. Like that's the biggest challenge for us is that we have a lot of single person shops and entrepreneurs and people that they're never going to have the budget, but they would take the free thing and it would be worth doing. So it's very important for us to say, okay, no, these are the companies that can afford to pay 60, 100, 200 grand a year for ongoing reporting across all this front. But we're really just giving stuff away to get in the door. And because risk is their primary concern, right? They don't want to take any risk. They don't want to put any money out there and have to explain why they lost it or burned it. So, yeah, I mean, we could, in theory, do something like hey, you sign up for the digital customer journey report for a year and you get the first one for free to prove that it works and that we can do it. But then you pay, and, it's just back end loaded. They pay twice or three times as much for that report for the remaining 3 quarters. And, you could limit some of your exposure to that in having them sign for the year up front and then they have an out at the end of the first quarter. But then the question becomes, okay, so now what we're going to, every quarter be doing 3 of these where we're doing the full labor up front for quarter 1 and we're rolling the dice on what happens with the back 3 quarters. Does our model support that and can we do that? So yeah, that's an ongoing, and really that's ultimately something that you have to judge and think about, Katie, is, how much risk do we take on these marketing programs and how many resources do we dump into it without guaranteed promise on the back end? If we were one of these companies where like, yeah, we need to double revenue every year so that in 6 years we're acquired, then yeah, we'd be taking crazy risk and we'd probably also be talking to investors and doing a lot of insanity. And, is it really in Trust Insight's best interest to just get on that treadmill that everybody else gets on? And, 5 years from now, we all hate the company. Like, do we want to go there?
What about things like, so let's say it's not a free report, but what about things like, 30 minutes of, marketing therapy? So you get a free 30 minutes with Chris or Katie or John to ask any questions that you can possibly fit into those 30 minutes. And we will talk through the solutions. Like, do you think that that is a tactic that works to demonstrate our expertise and our ability to solve problems, but also, to at least get people like thinking about, who can help me with this thing or what problems do I even have?
Going back to what John had said earlier, which I think is really important with that, is it has to go. That's the kind of thing you want to offer to people who have the ability to buy, right? Because there are a ton of tire kickers who will never buy anything, right? We have a list of names of people that we're like, oh yeah, when we hear from this person, we like them. They're a nice person, but they're never going to buy anything. And so when you're investing, it's still an investment. It's just a time investment instead of a monetary investment. It's one of those things you got to be very careful about who that goes out to. It can't be a cattle call.
Yeah, and trust is a big part of that too. It's because if we just do a generic, hey, get a free half hour with one of us, that's not the same as if somebody else says, hey, you should sit down and talk to these guys for a half hour. Like that's a totally different thing. And so, yeah, that gets into, now you start to get more into biz dev. And that's kind of another place where sales is huge right now, is like finding that list of 5 people who have budget, who have problems. And if you say, hey, come get on the phone with us for a half hour because we want to talk to you specifically about these things we know are a problem for you, then that kind of lead gen stuff works. But yeah, it is tough. Well, and in some ways to, blow our own horn on. We're actually doing that pretty effectively right now, and that like anybody can schedule 30 minutes with me, but they don't get to talk to you guys unless I've talked to them and it makes sense for you guys to talk to them too, and so we do have that 2-tiered, and that does work pretty well. So unfortunately one of us gets to take the hit for when the lug nuts call and they're asking me crazy questions about, that's a whole nother show. It's like when I talk about people with like their model, so that, by selling your Facebook data, you should be getting 50 grand a year. I'm like, oh, well, yeah, that is a great idea in theory, but I don't see that happening in the next 6 months. And, that's not the kind of project we're going to jump on pro bono to help you get off the ground, so, but yeah, access and being able to have meaningful discussions, that is right at the heart of, getting things going and running with it.
What about, and Chris, maybe this is more of a question for you, because I know this is something that you have really sort of doubled down on it. How do you activate or, sort of fish around in your online community? So one of the things that we're doing at Trust Insights is we're really working hard to build an online community, and you can join that community for free. And we don't pitch you sales every single day or anything like that. We have channels dedicated. You can join our free Slack group at trustinsights.ai/analytics for marketers. But where does the online community fit into this sort of end of year, hey, we need to get more business in the door, or even just any time of the year?
A lot of that requires two things. One, it requires that people be having conversations on a regular and frequent basis, that you stimulate those conversations to elicit need. Because if you are asking people on a regular basis, like, hey, have you tried this? Has anyone heard of this? Ask questions about this. Over time, you build a profile of people. You get an understanding of, who keeps asking questions about Google Analytics, who keeps asking about this or that. And you can get a sense of where that person's need is. So that if you do want to do something, sort of year end, you can say, this person, this person, and this person. These are the three people that all year have been asking and saying, hey, I'm struggling with this. Okay, great. Maybe, that's where, to John's point, those sort of activations, I don't like calling them manipulations, but activations really come to say, like, hey, you've been asking about Google Analytics for like 9 months now, and it's pretty clear you still have not gotten it fixed. Would you like us to, do you have an extra 20K in your budget? Do you want us to just come and fix it? So that's part one. And then part two is the community itself is and should be a really good retention tool, to be able to say, like, hey, here's the value that you get out of being connected with us. Here's a way for you to stay in touch with us. And the ideal is it becomes a referral engine. So not only the community itself, but also for the company sponsoring it, to say, like, hey, this company sponsors this community, and by the way, they know their stuff too. So join their community, you can talk with them and use it as a referral engine. That's not a year-end thing. That's not a campaign-based thing. That's something that is momentum-based. You have to do on an ongoing basis. And as with all social media communities, you have to always provide more value than you take, so that people see a reason to be in there. But that said, if I wouldn't use it for something like year end, but certainly if there was a choice of, hey, we can't stay in business without some help, then all bets are off at that point. You pull every string available to you to see what can happen. For more mundane, make your year end numbers, I think the model of doing some advertising and then doing direct outreach, direct mail, direct email, direct messaging people is the way to go. If you know somebody has a need and you've just been watching them carefully, who you need to talk to.
So I'm hearing some recurring themes that, whether or not you guys are explicitly saying them, I'm going to pull them out from what you've both been talking about. The number one thing is trust. And so trust has to go both ways. Number one, you have to trust that the people that you're reaching out to are the right people. And so that comes from your data analysis. It comes from the information that they have given you permission to collect about them. And number two, they need to trust you so that they're going to pick up the phone or answer their email or check their DMs. And so that, to me, is the thing that you can't just skip over. So when we're talking about sort of those last minute sales tips, you can't build trust last minute. That's a long game. That's that relationship, that networking, that, Chris, to your point, to give more than you get back. And so, John, and also you're talking about, making sure that we're not wasting our time trying to capture people who are never going to have the budget. And so I feel like that for me has been underscored numerous times in this conversation of trust is the number one thing in order to make sales effective, to make it work, to make that business development work. Because if one side of the equation doesn't have that confidence that the person they're talking to has their best interest, it's not going to work. People aren't going to buy, or they're going to buy once and say, this was a terrible experience. I'm never going to buy from them again. I'm never going to work with them. And so I feel like that's the number one thing I'm hearing. The number two thing I'm hearing is, there's really no, quick win. There's really no like quick and dirty way, like the, Black Friday deals or the deep discounts. It might work in the immediate, but in the long term, it might actually be more harmful for your business. So that's sort of the second takeaway that I'm getting. So those are two big things. The third thing is you have to really understand your customer base and meet people where they are in the journey. Are they just learning about you? Have they been with you for a while but never engaged? Have they engaged with you but they're not ready to buy? Have they said they want to buy but they don't have the budget? And so really tailoring those messages to people where they are versus just one sort of blanket blast to everybody saying, hey, we're selling stuff. Why don't you come buy it? So I guess those are the big things that I'm getting from this conversation is their last minute sales tips in terms of how to just not do sales poorly in general.
Think about it this way. What if somebody said, hey, I need to get married really fast? Like, how's that going to end? Right? When you think about it, it's like, okay. I mean, there's ways to make that happen. People in Las Vegas do it all the time, but in terms of the long-term value, it's just like when we were talking about customers. If you acquire somebody as a customer, just purely on discounting, it's like the Bed Bath and Beyond problem. Nobody shops at Bed Bath and Beyond except when there's a sale, right? They've so conditioned their customers to say, like, I'll only shop here when something's 40% off, that they can't get people to come in otherwise. And so when you're looking at all these different tactics to try to make sales happen, it's like trying to make a marriage happen. And yes, you do have to balance it with, we need to stay in business and pay bills and things like that. But I don't think it's one of those things I think is tricky to accelerate. Now, I'm sure, and if you're listening to this and you've had some proven successes in not only closing sales quickly, but having good long-term lifetime value from those customers, I would love to hear what that is, because I think you can get a fast customer. I think you can get a good customer, but I don't necessarily think you get both at the same time.
Yeah, you have to be willing to take a hit, if you want to give somebody some kind of tremendous value to them. If they take action now, you might be able to get them to move, but you pay a price for that. That doesn't come free. There's always something that comes back and bites you on that, whether it's cash flow or they churn. The churn is a whole nother thing we could dig into, but I don't want to drag on too much. But we do have to say everything 40% off this week, so hurry up. No, I'm kidding. That's not happening.
I guess that, the big takeaway, if people are interested, is, we can certainly help you with your end of year planning, your beginning of year planning, your middle of year planning. We can help you get your system set up for your fresh, clean start for the new year, whatever it is. Don't be afraid to reach out at any time is really the takeaway. And the best place to reach us is in our free Slack community, Analytics for Marketers. The link is at the bottom of the screen, trustinsights.ai/analytics for marketers, where you can join over 2,000 people who are talking about marketing and analytics and Google and AI. And, sometimes we're talking about the kind of music that we're listening to that day. It definitely widely varies depending on who you're talking to. John, Chris, any last thoughts or any last, pro tips on just sales in general?
it's been a crazy year. Go reach out at the end of the year in December at some point. Thank your customers for doing business with them, and just let that start some discussion. But that's the place to start.
Yeah, I agree. I think given the years of not just this year but last year as well that we've all had, it's what, March 674th 2020. Remembering that at the end we are all still just a bunch of people, and there is a lot of benefit into just reaching out and saying hi without necessarily buying intent. Just checking in with people. I was talking to somebody yesterday who was going through a pretty rough time, but in time that hopefully they get things squared away, and as it staying in touch and building those relationships really does pay off in the long term.
I would agree with that. Well, thanks guys. I appreciate your last minute sales tips, your pro tips, and your tips on how not to screw up sales.
All right, thanks for tuning in, everyone. We'll talk to you next week. Thanks for watching today. Be sure to subscribe to our show wherever you're watching it. For more resources and to learn more, check out the Trust Insights podcast at trustinsights.ai/TI podcast and a weekly email newsletter at trustinsights.ai/newsletter. Got questions about what you saw in today's episode? Join our free Analytics for Marketers Slack group at trustinsights.ai/analytics for marketers. See you next time.